Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for being here, considering how nice and sunny outside it is. My name... Turn it up. My name is Nicole Allegich, and I live in Lions Bay. Like many of you, I'm here because I'm deeply concerned about the direction our province and our country has taken over the past decade. We're gathered at an important moment for British Columbia. After years of NDP leadership, many people across our province are feeling the effects of rising costs, strained public services, and growing concerns about the direction we're headed. This upcoming election is a real opportunity to reset, to bring forward new ideas, renewed accountability, and a clear vision to get BC back on track. That's why it's my pleasure to introduce a candidate who is stepping forward to be part of that change. Kerry-Lynne Findlay brings a wealth of experience, a strong commitment to public service, and a deep understanding of what matters most to British Columbians: safe communities, a healthy economy, and a government that works for the people. Please join me in giving a warm West Vancouver welcome to Kerry-Lynne Findlay.
Well, thank you so much. What a great turnout. This is terrific. And I think Jacqueline picked the location, but I'm looking at a sign here that says Ragged Ass Road, and I thought, oh yeah, this must be a campaign stop, because that's what you start feeling like after a while in a couple of debates. That's great. There's so much to talk about, so I'll tell you normally what I do is I just talk for a while, and then I'm happy to answer questions for a while. And I try and cover a lot of subjects because, man, I could talk for hours and hours about what's wrong with our province under the NDP government. I could keep going on forever. So maybe if you buy me a beer or something, I'll talk even longer. But it's a gorgeous Sunday here in West Van and all through the Lower Mainland, so I do apologize for bringing you in, but you know, it's important. I'm going to give you a little bit about my background first, because some of you here have known me forever, like since I was a teenager, and others don't know me at all. So I'm a mother of four. My husband's here. He's the MLA for Surrey South. But long before he was an MLA, he was an actor, and he had a very interesting life, much more than me as a lawyer, because he was in movies and commercials and TV shows, and everybody wanted to talk to him, not me. But that's not the reason I got into politics. But so I was born in Ladysmith, big town in Ladysmith on Vancouver Island. It's about the same size now as it was then. And my dad was an electrician. He was Findlay Electrical Services on Vancouver Island, Colwood, Langford, Ladysmith, Nanaimo. Worked all the way up into Bella Bella Coola, things like that. And I'm one of 6 kids, 5th of 6. So we never had anything handed to us. We all worked hard. I worked through university, always part-time and in the summers. I was 2 grades ahead in school, so I started UBC young. I was the youngest in my law school class at UBC, so someone asked me, what did you do in your undergrad? We have a UBC student here. I did Eastern European and Soviet studies, which actually I thought with perestroika would destroy my 4 years of learning, and it turned out it's helped me a lot in politics, because I can see socialist creep, and I can see, and I can see the methodology. I can see it as it comes forward, and it's actually helped me a great deal to understand what I'm looking at. So then I embarked on a law career at 23 in downtown Vancouver. I am not a career politician. This is my second busy career. I was a lawyer a lot longer than I've been in politics, but I think that it uniquely places me for this time in our province's history, and I'll tell you more about that later. This is my home, and it's your home. And ultimately, I'm running because I believe our home is worth fighting for. That's what I firmly believe. So in law, I was a civil litigator. I did trial work, but not criminal. I did the first couple of years, little criminal. And I found out I had to deal with criminals, so I decided I wasn't that comfortable there. So I ended up doing mostly what you call personal injury, sorry. I'm looking at a personal injury lawyer as I said that. Personal services law, meaning family, estate litigation. I did do some personal injury work. Employment law, if you lost your job, I'd negotiate your severance, things like that. But along the way, in my life, as it does in everyone's life, I had a tragedy, and when I was 34, my husband died. And I had 2 kids, 6 and 7.5. And at that time, my parents, God bless them, because as I said, I was the 5th of 6 kids, so they were doing this to help me, said, we're gonna come live with you for a couple years and help you get back on your feet, because along with losing my husband, we lost 3/4 of our family income. And so it was a tough time. And we bought a leasehold property, a leasehold home on Musqueam. Well, you probably know where I'm going here. I'll try not to give you the whole story, but the Coles Notes version is this. Do you still use Coles Notes at UBC? Probably not. You probably don't even know what I'm talking about. Anyway, I just dated myself. So what GPT would say, or Grok, is that when we bought there, we bought because we were going to have 3 generations living together, and it had been a peaceful community for 24 years. There was going to be a review and a negotiation on a yearly payment coming up in about 6 years. But it was peaceful, and one of the things to this day I remember the realtor saying to me, you pay your property taxes to the city of Vancouver like everybody else. Makes sense? You pay your taxes based on market value. Here in West Van, market values are pretty high, so you pay a lot of taxes. But 1 year after we moved in, the government said, we're changing now. You will no longer pay your property taxes to the city. You're going to pay them to Musqueam. They are now your taxing authority. Only you have no representation with an Indian band. Only if you're a band member are you allowed to make representation to chief and council. I mean, you can have a meeting with them if they consent, but it isn't by right. And I was told there is no such thing in Canada. That's an American concept. Well, most of us would be surprised to find that out, because we think if we've got an individual or neighborhood dispute, that we can go to mayor and council, not always easy, but you can, and you can talk to them. You could do it there. Then the BC government said, we're going to change the BC Assessment Act. And they changed it from assessing leasehold properties as though, as at market value, they changed it to assessing them as though they were fee simple or freehold off reserve. So our property taxes doubled, tripled, even quadrupled. So now you're paying high property taxes to a governing tax authority that you did not vote for, that you did not realize was even in the mix. And all right, what's next? Well, what was next was that we had a dispute over this yearly payment. Now, by then I remarried to this handsome man who was an unsuspecting bachelor. I made him the father of 2 and then quickly the father of 4, and then he said, I can't leave now, it's too much. So here we are 30 whatever years later. Anyway, and now we're in this fight. We're in a fight for our home, but it was more than that. There's 75 homes that were affected, over 200 people. Over 30% of them were seniors or already retired. And we're in a fight. We are trying to negotiate a reasonable amount. The leaseholders offered $8,800 a year. It had been low in the first 30 years. That was by design of the lease. The Musqueam demanded $36,000 a year. Well, adding $3,000 a month after tax onto a tripled property bill and onto all the normal things of life was impossible for everyone. So we resisted. When we resisted, they sued us. So now we're defendants in a major lawsuit against an Aboriginal group that is backed up by both the federal and provincial governments. We were on our own. Some people were sympathetic, others were not. They said, what did you buy there for in the first place? Well, the landscape changed. And this is what we're facing as a province right now. And this is where experience counts. And this is where someone who actually understands this issue is an imperative. Because I was a litigator and a lawyer, I was thrown into the mix, of course, and I ended up being the instructing lawyer and part of the team. We went to the BC Supreme Court, we won. We went to the BC, we went to the BC Court of Appeal, we lost. And then we went all the way to the Supreme Court of Canada, and we won! And why is that important? Because it illustrates people shouldn't be put in these desperate, frantic situations with no input, no consultation, no discussion. But then if they are, we have to fight. Because ultimately, you cannot win in any of these disputes, whether you do it through negotiation and settlement or lawsuits, and I don't advocate lawsuits. I always try to settle all my cases, but it doesn't always work that way. But it's the fight you need. And you have to understand what is the fight you're in, right? You have to come to grips with this, whether we like it or not. This took years. All lawsuits take years. It cost the homeowners $1.5 million in legal and expert fees. And this is 25 years ago. We would be going, Brent and I and others, can I get your $500? Can I get your $1,000? You know, seniors would say, I'm tapped out. We'd say, we'll carry you. Like, it was a real neighborhood effort and nightmare. It took a heavy toll, emotionally, physically, on people's health. I talked to a good friend of mine who's a cardiologist at UBC. He said, what's going on over there? And I said, what do you mean? It's not too far from UBC. He said, well, I got more and more patients every day because they're having heart problems. I said, well, this is what they're going through. People were coming to him with their heart problems, but not explaining what was causing the heart problem. Then the biggest devastation is financially. Because of the dispute, because of the lawsuit, because of the uncertainty around Aboriginal governance, appraisers would no longer appraise fair market value on those properties. So banks stopped lending. No one would, I'm thinking any financial institution, they just wouldn't lend anymore. So you couldn't mortgage, you couldn't refinance, and you couldn't even sell because most people need a mortgage to buy. So the market collapsed. All of this is unfolding around everyone's lives. I had a busy law practice. I had 4 children. We were in it every single day. And on top of that, you're dealing with a major lawsuit and the cost and of all of it. At the end of the day, the lawsuit was, you can look it up, Musqueam versus Glass, 2000, Supreme Court of Canada. So by all means, look it up and you'll see. What the court said at the end of the day was that the, on average, payment should be $9,600 a month. So much closer to our $8,800 offer than $36,000. And then everything went on. But things don't go back to normal that quickly. You have divisions, and you have people who've lost everything. I did a lot of family law in my career, and when you do family law, and I hope none of you have ever been in this situation, but when a family breaks up, first thing you have to look at is finances. How are we now going to deal with 2 homes instead of 1? I probably looked at more financial statements of the average British Columbian than most accountants. I can tell you that if you're lucky enough to own a home, that is the major, by far the major asset of most British Columbians. If that collapses, if your equity is sucked out, you don't have much. And yet you're still paying property taxes, your mortgage payments, and life goes on. It's a serious issue. The Cowichan decision, which we're all talking about now, was based in Richmond, but it is a BC Supreme Court decision. It affects our whole province. I've just come back from a tour up north. I was all over the place, Prince Rupert Terrace, Fort St. John, Williams Lake, Prince George, I was all over. It's the number one issue for everyone in our province right now, because they look at it and go, what does this mean for my future? We had seniors who had to go to inferior seniors care because they didn't have the equity in their homes to pay for their, old age, which is what they had counted on, as an example. And by the way, that $1.5 million was all paid by the homeowners. You know who paid the Musqueam's legal bills? The government. You did.
Our taxes, yeah.
And at the end of it, when we won, we were awarded $370,000, as I recall, in costs, because it's not meant to be your legal cost, but it's a contribution. Who paid that? The government. You did.
And you did too.
And I did too. So,
Okay, both sides.
We're paying ourselves, we're left alone, and they took no risk. And this is one of the problems we have with relying on the court system. Another problem we have, the judge said very clearly in the Cowichan decision that neither the federal government nor the provincial government presented any argument nor presented any evidence on the superiority of our land title system. So it wasn't even before the court. The court can't go outside of the evidence and arguments and say, well, I'm just going to decide it this way. It doesn't work that way. They abandon the field. They've abandoned us on this issue for ideological reasons. And with all due respect, I'm running to be the leader and then the premier to help all British Columbians, not just less than 5%. We cannot govern 95% of our population by giving such superior rights to the less than 5% that we can't function. It doesn't work. The other part that it's important to remember and know, and I think people are starting to understand this, and that is that when you see Crown in these cases, that is the government of the day. The government of the day, right now, the NDP EB government, but other NDP provincial governments are guilty of this as well. They are the ones who hire the legal team, hire the lawyers, and they're the ones who instruct them what to argue and what not to argue. So you go back in history to something like the Delgamuukw case, and I won't go into all this, but that was another NDP government under Mike Harcourt, where the Crown won at the trial level, at the Supreme Court level. Harcourt and the NDP changed the winning legal team, gave them different instructions, and the Crown lost at the Court of Appeal and lost at the Supreme Court of Canada. When I say lost, I mean from the point of view of the 95% of us, we lost. And this has to change. The only way we can change it is by not just bringing in a conservative government, but a majority conservative government. We need it now. They have the control over the timing of an election, but I know this. This is where experience counts, and then I'll go through my political experience. But, you know, as a lawyer, I see Watson Gopel has a sign up here. There's a, I used to be a partner, equity partner at Watson Gopel. They didn't have a nice West Van office in Dunderave when I was there. Missed that. But, you know, this is where experience matters. We don't have time for someone who's never run a business, for someone who has never been in politics in a real way, who's never gone right through an election cycle and taken the risk of putting their family name on a sign. We don't have time for them to figure out politics. We don't have time for them to think, well, how do I debate something in the legislature? How do I get a bill through? What is first and second reading? What is the speaker's job? What is my job? What's your job? We don't have time because we need to have done this yesterday. And urgency matters in this case, and that's why I want you to really think about this when you're deciding who to vote for on that ballot. Frankly, in the race now that started, someone asked me with 11, now it's down to 5, but there's 2 people running who don't have any experience in politics at all. Then there's, meaning competitive politics, not backroom politics. Yeah. Big P, small p. And there's a sitting MLA. The problem with him, Mr. Millibar, is that he was a BC Liberal MLA who voted for DRIPA, who voted for SOGI, who voted to condemn the Freedom Convoy, who voted to say in a motion that the NDP government's handling of COVID was perfect. How do you square that? How can we trust, and he's a nice man, and I'm assuming everyone in this race wants the best for BC. But how do you trust someone who was led to those votes to now go in a completely different direction? I don't think we can. We can't afford that kind of risk. If you look at videos that I've done as a member of parliament going back 5-10 years, you will see me arguing against safe supply, warning about the opioid crisis, arguing against decriminalization of hard drugs. You'll see me standing up against racism. You'll see me debating the Emergencies Act when that was brought in by the Liberals, who it's since been declared unconstitutional. And in that, I was so passionate that night about what was going on. I was so concerned because the Windsor Bridge was cleared, Coutts, Alberta was cleared, South Surrey Crossing was cleared by ordinary policing powers. And they wanted to bring in an act that actually suspended the civil liberties of all Canadians. And in that speech that night, I said, you know, in our national anthem, we cry out to God to make us glorious and free. We cannot be glorious unless we are free, right? And yet, there's another person running in this race, Ms. Elliott. Again, I like her, we've had lunch. But there's videos. She says they're not there. I don't know. Like, come up with a good reason why that video's there. Don't say it doesn't exist. I mean, it exists. Anyway, there's videos out there where she's saying the very opposite of what she's saying now. And what was said in that debate, did anybody see the debate? What was said in that debate was, the NDP government has actually thanked you for agreeing with them on SOGI and safe supply, and she denied it. Well, that's not how I would answer that. If I don't have to answer that, because it isn't true of me. But if it was, I'd say, well, I've evolved, my thinking's changed. But to say it's not there, when anyone can look at it, is just, makes you think, what can we trust here? When I went into politics, I really went into politics. I had a very good career. I was president of the Bar Association. I, was making good money, much better than I've ever made in politics. But this Musqueam dispute activated something in me and supporters who came to me and said, Kerry, you've been advocating for us, you're out there in the front lines, you should be in politics, because it's at that level that you can actually make policy changes. And that's really what got me in there a few years later. And I was elected in 2011 into the Stephen Harper National Stable Majority Conservative Government, or whatever it was we said those days. Oh, for those days. Because we, during that time, were coming out of the worst recession since the 1930s. Anybody remember this time? A few of you are older. And we needed fiscal balance. We needed a clear vision to go forward. And that's exactly what we need here in BC right now. So when I went in, I was first named Parliamentary Secretary to Justice. I was given a big omnibus justice bill called the Safe Streets and Communities Act. We targeted violent repeat offenders. The Liberals have pulled back almost all of it. Don't we need that today? How many times are you in your car and the radio comes on or the news comes on at home and you say, some police officer has just been killed, some innocent bystander's just been killed, some kid, 16, has just been killed because of a violent repeat offender, someone who is out on the street, able to do violence again because we have what we call catch and release, which is supposed to be for fishing, not for people. So this is important to understand, because at that time, violent crime went down 38% in Canada, and I believe it would have continued to go down with that kind of legislation, but we don't have it now. Then Stephen Harper appointed me to cabinet, made me Associate Minister of National Defence, so I understand very well. I've had very high-level briefings on BC and Canada's place in this crazy geopolitical landscape that we call our world, our planet. Then I was promoted to Minister of National Revenue. I did that for 2.5 years. I was on Treasury Board. I'd also been in what we saw as nation building through the shipbuilding program. I've been on the ministerial committee putting that together. We need more nation building and we need more province building. In that tour I just took, and I'm going out again later this week, I was struck by how our infrastructure throughout the whole province is crumbling. We have bridges that you can put your foot through that are part of the Alaska Highway. We have bridges that are the only crossing over major riverways that are crumbling. We need better highways, wider highways, faster highways. We need to do more. The Massey Tunnel, come on. If any of you are visiting or live out south of the Fraser, we've been talking about that crossing for 50 years. It's going to be a tunnel, it's going to be a bridge, it's going to be a tunnel, it's going to be a bridge. Nobody can quite decide. Now I hear there's some seismic study out there that the NDP are burying that says that it can't be a twin tunnel. Now I don't know till I get in if that's true, but it's very curious that nothing's happening, isn't it? And look at our health care. Please, we've got emergency rooms being shut down through the whole province. We're having people, women about to give birth, being diverted to other hospitals 2 and 3 hour drive away. Well, I don't know about the rest of you women who are mothers, but I didn't have an extra 3 hours when I was going to have my kids. And the men who love those women, aren't you worried about them? Aren't you worried about your daughters and your granddaughters? What is going on here? We have at least 2 levels of bureaucracy in our healthcare system that makes no sense. And in the meantime, people are going to India and Mexico and Taiwan and China and Alberta to get their surgeries because they can get scans. It's not nice. And you can get help there. When you get into our system, we have excellent doctors and excellent nurses. But access is a problem, right? And our daughter's just been through breast cancer. Well, she's not fully out of it yet. My husband's just been through cancer all summer. We were at the cancer agency. And he's cancer-free now. But honestly, I wouldn't have done this if he wasn't, because if he needed further surgery or something, you stand with your family and you support them. But when I knew he was going to be okay, then we've got to do something about our province. And he supports me in this for that reason. When I was Minister of National Revenue, very briefly, we focused, we had a vision, and we had a plan. We called it the Debt Reduction Action Plan, DRAP. We all participated, every minister, every ministry, the executive, the deputy ministers, because we had to do something about the state of affairs in Canada. We lowered personal income tax, lowered corporate income tax, took the GST from 7 to 5%. Did you see last week, Carney said he's putting it back up to 7% after all these years? That 2% makes a huge difference in the cost of living. We also got back to a balanced budget and a surplus out of the debt. If I can lead teams to do that for our nation, I tell you, I can lead teams to do that for our province, and that's exactly what we need to do. And then along the way, dipsy doodle back and forth and law and whatever, I ended up back in the opposition benches. And I was there, had various shadow minister roles, but in my most recent role, I was the chief opposition whip, first woman to ever be the whip of the Conservative Party. And it is an interesting managerial HR challenge to be a whip of a major political party, because you're not their boss, although they called me boss, but you're not their boss. The leader isn't their boss. It's the same in Victoria. Everybody is their own kind of little self-employed franchise. They get sent there by their community. They have their own offices. They have their own staff. But they choose to run under a banner. So the way to approach this, and my approach, and I'm declaring it ahead of time, I believe in a collaborative leadership approach. I've seen it work, and in politics you need that. You cannot come in like the CEO of a big company and say, you'll do this and you'll do that, because their jobs don't depend on you. You need to work together. You need to build consensus. All my training, and I took advanced negotiation at Harvard, and I'm a certified mediator and litigator. I've done all these things, but all my training showed me that in that job, which I wasn't anticipating, and I certainly didn't apply for, but you get to know each and every member of the team. What is your motivation for being here? Are you more community-minded? Do you like going in and debating in the legislature in Victoria? Not everyone does. Not everyone does. Some people, they love going to events in the community and they love meeting people. And others actually are shy, even though they put their hands up. So you need to get to know, what is it that really motivates you? That's how you come together with 80% commonality to present as a government in waiting and beat the NDP in the next election. You're never going to agree on 100%. Who agrees? You don't even agree with your husband or wife on 100%. And if you say you do, you're lying. Come on. You need to get that majority consensus, and you can do it. Because the target, and this is the problem with leadership races, people divide and it's inside the family and it can get difficult. But the truth of the matter is, that is not our goal or our target. We have to be looking to the NDP and their abysmal record where they're crushing working men and women in our province. That's where we need to head. And as we head there, we can do that as a unified caucus. I believe I am a unifier. I have the most endorsements of all the candidates of the MLAs, by the way. And I think that shows. And yeah, one of them's here. Heather Moss at the back. Wave, Heather.
Chilliwack North.
Chilliwack North. Also, my husband says he's voting for me, so that's
Well,
always says he's not sure. Okay. He says, keep talking, I'll make up my mind. But you know, this is important because it's signaling ahead of time that we can do it. We can do it as a team, and we will unify. So there's been a lot of talk, fractures in the caucus. I actually think we're on top of that already. And I'm talking to everyone. I've also been endorsed by some independent MLAs, and someone asked me here about One BC. You did? And I just want to say on that, I understand why Yuri did that, but he was over his skis. He did not have the authority. We are candidates. We are not the leader yet. He sent out an email last week, signed leader of the Conservative Party of BC. I thought, you're getting ahead of yourself, buddy. But, you know, the problem with that deal is that you're capitulating before we even get to the starting line. You're saying we cannot do it. You're saying, oh, we've had, he said, I think, a pragmatist. And you know, we can't do it because the vote will be split, because they're at 10% in a recent poll. Well, they're at 10% when our party doesn't have a leader yet. If you have a leader who's articulate and clear and provides clarity and says, we're going to build a prosperous province again, a lot of those people are going to naturally come back. Right now, they're thinking we don't have a choice. But they will have a choice, and they'll have an excellent choice. Having said all that, I talked to her too. I talk to everybody. I'm a talker. And, you know, I had someone after the debate the other night say, would you welcome someone who voted NDP? And I said, absolutely. Would you welcome someone who voted BC Liberal or BC United? Absolutely. Because I believe a vision of prosperity, a vision of good jobs, of not saying that our 4-pillar industries are sunset industries. That's what Eby's calling them. He's saying this at the UBCM conferences. Can you believe it? You go into the legislature, beautiful dome, 4 pillars of our economy that BC was built on. Fisheries, agriculture, mining, and forestry. And they're calling them sunset industries. They're sunsetting because they've sunsetted them, right? They've taken our processing out of our lumber, so we're just exporting raw logs to Asia and buying it back as usable lumber. Our oil gets sent down to the United States at a discount, gets refined at Cherry Point where we live in South Surrey. I can see it churning away across the bay, and then they sell it back to us at world prices. We've got Atlantic Canada buying their LNG from Australia. We have the need right here, and we have the solutions right here in our God-given resources. I didn't put copper in the ground. It's there for us to use. It's there for us to find. Miners, someone else here is a wife of a mining executive, I think. You know, we have to get back to permitting on shorter timelines that are clear so that our mining projects can go forward. And by the way, this ridiculous situation the NDP has put us in, where if they stall on the renewal of your permit, the default goes to the government and you can't move forward. No, the default should go to the miners, right? If you can't get your act together as government to tell us we can move forward, then by default we move forward. Because we're talking about millions, even hundreds of millions of dollars of investment, heavy equipment, good paying jobs, and they are happy to let that die. They have let it die. and they're prepared to put the final nail in the coffin. What their vision of BC seems to be that we'll just be a park. And even then, now they're putting new rules in saying you can't go to the park anytime you want to. Or you have to pay more to go to the park. What happened to just going for a hike once in a while in a park? You know? Anyway, obviously they're going the wrong way. We need to build that pipeline, we need to see that built, and we need to bring a tanker to pick up. We have 200 American tankers going up and down the west side of Vancouver Island every year. And yet we say they can't come up north to Prince Rupert, 2 days closer to Asian markets, by the way. Our competitors are Seattle and Long Island in California. We have a 2-day advantage on them in terms of cost and freight costs. You know, these are natural, God-given advantages that we're not taking advantage of, and we must. Because along with less government and leaning out government and more efficient government and doing for BC what we did for Canada, we need to up the revenue side, don't we? And we need better paying jobs. And I'm not saying everyone's going to make a bigger paycheck. What I'm saying is there will be jobs with good paychecks that you can actually find. And when you have that job, you will keep more in your pocket because your taxes are going to go down under a conservative government led by me. I'm going to open it up for questions just a moment, but I did want to say just a couple of things about taxes. Because people, as soon as I say, well, I'm going to get rid of the tax on gas, which is going to be 44 cents a liter, people go, oh, but we're in so much debt. How can you do that? Yes. What we need to do, and I've done it before, is you need to lower taxes on everyday essentials. Get the engines of the economy going again. Get people spending. Get people with more options as you're leaning out government and unleashing our resources. Yes, it's a balance. But that 44 cents a liter's not very much. 44 cents a liter on gas. It's important that we get rid of this. We need our vehicles to get around. And this utopia where we all live, 10 minutes from our job and we walk there, doesn't exist. And I hope it never does, because we need to get around. We need to do what we need to do. And everyday life means driving. And as soon as you get out of like West Van or North Van or downtown Vancouver, there's distances. People up north, they don't have, I said, I think it was in Terrace, I said, I don't see a rapid GO train going down the main drag here in Terrace. They've got to go long distances to work. They have to go long distances, even just get their kids around. Our grandsons are playing rugby in North Van today. I would have liked to have zipped over there, but I couldn't. Anyway, you have to get your kids around. You have the doctor's appointment. Let's get real here. This is the way real people live. And we have to be talking to the hardworking men and women of British Columbia, speaking to their heart and saying, look, we're here to do the work. We're here to do the jobs that need being done so that you can have a future. I am tired of people I know saying, my young adult child just graduated from university is leaving. We have 4 children. One lives in Ontario. He's a lawyer. I'm going to apologize right now for how many lawyers I gave birth to. So, my husband was an actor. He is not responsible. Our eldest daughter is a counselor. They live in Lynn Valley. Her husband is a staff sergeant, West Van PD. But my son is a lawyer. He lives in Ontario. My next daughter's a lawyer. She lives in downtown Vancouver on the east side in a cramped 2-bedroom rented condo. Our youngest daughter is a lawyer. She works in Calgary. Our youngest daughter, who just had a baby, She pays the same rent. I think it's a $50 difference between a lovely updated sort of mid-50s home in a beautiful neighborhood with a fence for the dog and grass in the front and grass in the back, 3-bedroom home, for the same as our next eldest daughter pays in East Van near the PNE on East Hastings, as all the chaos of East Hastings continues to go further and further up the street. They aren't allowed a pet, they have no storage, and it's a small 2-bedroom condo. Now those two girls, those sisters, they look at each other, and the younger one says, "Why don't you live in Calgary?" And the other daughter's going, "I don't want to have to leave where I grew up. I don't want to have to leave my home. But now I've got 2 little kids, newborn and 2, and I've got to start thinking, what is the quality of life that I can provide?" And it's hard as a parent to argue against this, right? So we need to have BC where we keep our best and brightest, where they have hope and opportunity, where we do not present no-hope budgets that say, you know, the answer to our overspending and our reckless spending and our $183 billion debt and our $13.3 billion deficit, the answer is you will all pay more taxes. Wow, that's a hopeful future for all of us. We have to change it. I need your help. Nobody can do it on their own. I need you to go to my website, findlayforbc.ca, if I haven't talked you to death already. And, I need your vote. I need your donations, because it does take money to run campaigns. And this is a grassroots movement. My whole team is from BC. I do not have imported advisors from Ontario, like others. And I don't have deep pockets that mysteriously end up financing my campaign. I have regular BC people who want a better future in our province, your home and mine, and who want to see that grassroots take hold, take government, and beat David Eby or whoever runs that party. And with that, I'll take questions and a bit of water.